Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you for inviting me here to discuss the April 28th, 2025 Iberian Peninsula blackout. In addition, a special thank you to the Office of Electricity. NERC and OER are working well together on all sorts of reliability items, including modernizing our standards and processes and other risk reliability or even this events like today. So thank you to them as well. Before I get started, I wanted to take a step back and give some perspective here. Throughout NERC's existence, and in fact the reason we were formed was to work to reduce the chance of blackouts, the risks to blackouts. Further, NERC follows system events and their causes throughout the world and shares experiences and lessons learned from them. Just to start, I want to be clear that this is not simply a resources fault, right? It's that people like to point fingers at resources. Rather, it's an engineering and operational challenge that must be addressed to ensure system conditions are understood and precautions are taken to be ready for system events. The initial thoughts were that this event was maybe driven by reduced inertia or frequency ride-through, but it's become clear from the Spanish reports anyway that the challenge was the ability to manage the grid's static and dynamic voltage. The information we have available for this presentation comes from those reports. However, there's also another independent report that's being put together by the European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity, or NSOE, as they focus on the Continental Inter-European Synchronous Area, or CESA, that whole perspective, and that's due in September, so we'll wait for that report to gain any kind of insights. Next slide, please. Just to give an overview of what we're looking at here. And so it's got four interconnections: Ireland, the UK, Nordic, and CESA, which is basically from Tunisia to Turkey. And they just recently added the Baltic states. There are 43 transmission service operators serving 36 countries and 500 million people. 400 million are in the continent. The system has 1 terawatts in net generation, about 2/3 on the continent. They have about 300,000 miles and of transmission, 160 in CESA. And of course, that's 500,000 like that in the United States. But they're all interconnected by DC, either underwater DC or across the interconnections. Next slide, please. While Portugal and Spain make up the Iberian Peninsula, obviously we're going to focus today on Spain. They have 120 gigawatts of installed capacity. That includes hydro. Their generation portfolio also has 66% renewable there. They also have about 8 gigawatts of rooftops, so we're talking about 50% of their generation is IBR, which is inverter-based resources. Next slide, please. Before the start of the event, it was a spring cool day. Spain was running about 2/3 from wind and solar, 10% from nuclear, 10% from hydro, and then the rest was, combined cycle and cogens. Total load was 27 gigawatts, including 1 gigawatt of export to France, 2.8 gigawatts to Portugal, and 800 megawatts to Morocco. Next slide, please. On April 28th, a series of events led to the Iberian Peninsula system blacking out at 12:33. The Portugal transmission system restored in 12 hours. Spain's transmission system restored in 16 hours. And a small part of southern France was also impacted, bordering Spain. Next slide, please. Since the morning of the day of the event, the system was experiencing voltage fluctuations. There were 3 minor incidents of inter-area oscillations. Now, it's always hard to explain what inter-area oscillation is, but basically you're kind of ringing into a system condition that impacts small changes on one part of the system impacts the other part of the system, and it's a natural frequency. You can think of it as maybe even a musical instrument sometimes, or you hit a certain note and you also get a vibration of another note. Half an hour before the blackout, there were 2 significant oscillations causing the decrease in average voltage. The first one was a locally forced oscillation, is what the Spanish report said. There's still more to learn there. The second was the inter-area oscillation, which kind of rings between Turkey all the way across the continent. Similar inter-area oscillations have been occurred since 2016, 2022, 2025, but they didn't end up with a blackout. In response to these oscillations, the operators activated mitigation measures. 12:22, voltage levels began to rise. 10 minutes later, the first generation loss occurred. In the next 20 seconds, an additional 1.5 gigawatts was lost, involving a variety of different types of resources. The Spanish and Portuguese systems then collapsed within 27 seconds from the loss of the first generation. So it's really very quick and not much operators could do. Next slide, please. Here you can see a little bit more about frequency. You'll see basically the Denmark, which is the orange line. Then you see the Spanish system as units get dropped. So as you would expect, when you lose a unit, frequency goes down. And you lose another unit, frequency goes down. And then, of course, finally, they lost frequency and had to split from the system. Next slide, please. This is kind of a visual of how things went. Starting from the oscillations that occurred a half hour before the blackout, operators prioritized oscillation mitigation measures. They wanted to dampen those things out. And it's a lightly loaded system, right? Not a lot of load going on in Spain. And a lot of lines, some of them are out because of the Ferranti effect. You know, so it's not an automobile, but the ability, when they're lightly loaded, lines will sometimes have higher voltage on one side than the actual side that the power is flowing, and so they'll take those lines out. Well, they start adding those lines back in to make the system stronger, to basically dampen out these oscillations. They switched off some shunt reactors. They reduced their export to France. These actions also caused voltage to increase. Further generators that were to absorb reactive power did not do so. I'm not sure why. Something more to learn there. After the loss of the first collector substation due to overvoltage, voltage increased more due to less power flow. As you can imagine, less power flow, less lightly loaded lines, voltage goes up, Ferranti effect. And due to the less power flow on those lines, it caused more reactive power and of course, the loss of reactive power absorption by the tripped units that were coming offline.
Mark, let me ask you on that one.
Yeah.
When voltage goes up, it threatens the frequency, right? And right, is it like an inverse relationship?
Frequency here was basically, based on the spinning units, and as we started losing spinning units, then frequency started going down. We'll get a little bit more into it.
Okay.
Anyway, that all led to more overvoltages, causing more generators to trip, and this, of course, then drives voltage higher as the trip goes. The units trip. The lines are less loaded, voltage goes up, frequency comes down. It's kind of a death trap, right? You start doing that. Red Electrica puts it this way: each generator disconnection caused a slight increase in voltage, which in turn caused disconnection of other generators, producing a cascading phenomenon. When frequency got too low, under-frequency load shedding started. Shedding load further reduced loading on the transmission system, worsening the overvoltage conditions, and that extended the overvoltage problem. Next slide, please. So we see kind of multiple contributing factors here. One is poor voltage ride-through performance of some of the resources. We're not sure exactly why, but individual generators did not absorb reactive power as they were expected, and collector substations connecting multiple resources tripped. Several plants tripped at kind of must ride-through levels. Again, we're not sure why. It could have been related to some of the tap changers. They have a lot of tap changers around our generation, and the tap changers may not be able to keep up with the voltage change. That's the only guess, but that's what Red Electrica suggested. Again, more work to be done there. We also saw insufficient dynamic voltage regulation. Spain relies solely on the operating conventional generators for dynamic voltage regulation. That's different than what we have here. Spain policies do not require the IBRs to provide dynamic voltage support. Most operate at a fixed power factor, which means that when a generation is curtailed during overvoltage conditions, the IBRs are not allowed to manage voltage. The system loses its ability to control reactive power. Also, then, unreliable voltage regulation for conventional generations. Most of the conventional generations with dynamic voltage control did not act as they expected, which was to absorb more reactive power. And of course, by the time they kind of recognized it and they started asking units to come online, it was too late. They couldn't get them online fast enough. And we also saw some potential gaps in operation planning. Voltage regulation seemed to be poorly managed here, and it's not clear if they included these oscillations, what they've seen in the past, in their kind of day-ahead contingency analysis for operational planning. And in hindsight, if operators understood how fragile the system was, they could have planned for additional dynamic voltage support from other plants early on and have them kind of spun up and ready to go. However, once they realized there was an issue, even though they ordered conventional generators to start, didn't have time to get them up online. So lessons learned from North America is that if resource tripping is caused by overvoltage and results in under-frequency conditions, under-frequency load shedding would result in higher voltages in the absence of sufficient voltage regulation. Next slide. Some of the measures that we've worked on here is just trying to see what we're learning from this outage. Yeah, some of the standards we have in place, for example, our voltage and reactive standards, along with FERC Order 827, ensure sufficient dynamic reactive support is planned and operated. Facilities design, connections, and maintenance, or FAC. Protection, relaying, and control, PRC. Modeling, data, and analytics, MOD standards, address individual resource performance. For example, PRC 24 and 29 for ride-through capability and Mod 26, calling for model validation, means that plant's voltage regulation capability will be periodically reviewed. The Interchange Reliability Operations and Coordination, or IRO, and Transmission Operations standards all call for operational analysis and real-time assessments to identify and operate within reliability limits. And FERC's Order 901 directives is even a wider variety of contingencies and operating conditions. In addition to standards, we are using tools at NERC to identify and close gaps. For example, our recent alert level 2 and now 3 with essential actions around making sure we get as much out of the reactive power supply as possible out of our inverters. Next slide, please. There are a host of other conclusions. Well, we'll just jump that one in. Thank you. That was very quick. Thank you very much. So here's some additional conclusions that came out of the Spanish report. Some of them, the words are a little bit kind of hard to approach because I think translation challenges. But clearly, they're talking about regulation, compliance, more auditing, improving their voltage control capabilities and oscillations. This is really all about getting reactive power out of your IBRs, which they don't allow right now. Increasing the interconnection with the European system. I don't know if that's the right answer. I haven't done the analysis, but we're talking about 3 gigawatts more that they're planning with France. Review the services. I think that's ancillary services is our guess, so I don't want to get too deep into it, but I think that's what they meant. Of course, updating their restoration procedures, analyzing operating procedures, boosting demand. This is the whole idea of getting more demand so they're not as lightly loaded, right? Then reindustrialization, electrification, electric transportation, et cetera.
Well, let me ask you about that, because I saw that. I'm like, well, gee, they want more data centers, or they want some buyers?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't read into their mind, but I think when you get reports from regulators and political organizations, they may have other agendas. But yeah, certainly they feel that they were lightly loaded, and obviously if they had more load, then this Ferranti effect would be easier to manage. And increased strength and flexibility. I think that's a little bit more around batteries and maybe synchronous condensers. I don't know if you think about how many batteries they have in California and synchronous condensers to manage voltage. Next slide, please. Looking at the most notable recommendations in the Red Electrica report, it appears that we're on the right track. There's recommendations to mandate all generating units capable of voltage regulation to perform such control. We already do that today. They call for the review of overvoltage protection settings. Recent NERC alerts have recommended essential actions to review all protection settings to maximize ride-through capability and reduce unexpected tripping. Findings from our level 2 alert were in the essential actions of level 3 that we recently released. When it comes to voltage control resources, we already use a wide variety of resources and different technologies, both electronic-based, like, for example, tens of gigawatts of utility-scale batteries installed that can provide voltage and frequency, especially if we start putting grid-forming inverters. California's got 10 gigs, 5 gigs in Texas. In perspective, Spain has 100 megawatts of battery. They have quite a bit of hydro, but I don't think that helped them this time. And they also recognize the need for better monitoring capabilities, which we've addressed through our PRC 28. Next slide, please. Last but not least, we want to highlight again the 901 activities that are very important to us, and we're working stridently to meet the deadlines, which I think are definitely on the right track around improving our modeling. You can't model it, you can't study it, you don't know where you're going. And so it helps us a great deal. And one of NERC's work plan priorities is to develop a comprehensive framework on risk. So next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your attention and look forward to any kind of observations that you have.
Can you go back to slide 11? You skipped over that, and that was the post-event recommendations. I'd like you to go back to slide 11 and work down that, because that's one of the things I want to hear about is your recommendations in detail here.
Yeah. So as it points out here, we already do this mandating generating units. They all have AVRs, so we have an ability to control voltages. Then as I mentioned before, the level 2 and 3 alerts really set us on a good position with existing inverters, right? And making sure we maximize the amount of VAR capability, voltage control capability, and reduce the unintended potential for tripping. Synchronous condensers and static VAR compensators are already levers in North America, bulk power system, and 28 helps us with the disturbance monitoring. So I may have whipped through that a little bit quickly in my remarks. But,
well, that's important. Can you also talk about, tell us about each one of these. You have 4 recommendations here.
Yeah, well, these recommendations came out of the Raleigh Electrical Report. And as I said, the photovoltaics or IBRs are not allowed by policy, by law, to provide any kind of reactive support. The reason that they give in there, though, again, I haven't done the studies, is they wanted to manage this kind of price chasing that might occur with photovoltaics on their system, and they're dispersed across the system, and it's hard to manage stability of the grid. So they wanted to lock them so they knew exactly what they're going to get from them, nothing more. While in this country, our standards say you have to have an AVR, you have to provide voltage support. So our photovoltaics, our IVRs, as well as your conventional generators, support voltage and voltage management. When it comes to reviewing overvoltage protection settings, as I mentioned before, we actually sent out a number of alerts to the existing fleet. Now we're writing standards, most of that's to new stuff that's being built on the system. But to the existing fleet said, we've asked these questions about your ability, where your settings are and what's your ability. And there's a big gap here. And so that's why our Essential Action Alert 3 said, go and make sure you maximize the amount of voltage support you can provide, and also look for, also either on frequency support too, when they can. They generally can't support frequency, but anyway, voltage support and not trip when unexpectedly. Enhancing our voltage control resources, again, as I said, because of NERC standards, and I think best practices, you see a lot of use in those areas that are heavy with IBRs with things like battery storage to help regulate voltage. Because again, even though you're getting some from your photovoltaics, you may need more. Also, you're coupling that maybe with your existing combustion turbine fleet too, because they got to provide frequency as well as voltage support. But again, it's managed well because of the mandates of some of the standards. And then just the idea of being able to monitor what's going on the system a little bit better, especially after events. So we've got the PRC 28 standard in place.
And you all, Mark, have been working on enhanced standards for ride-through capability, correct?
Yes.
You've been working. Tell us about that.
Well, of course, this is part of this has been kind of the work that addresses 901. The directives that were sent over by FERC. But before that, we also at NERC, through the Reliability Steering Committee, Reliability and Security Technical Committee, have developed a number of guidelines around making sure that you set your controls on inverters so that you can maximize the amount of support, but also not to spuriously trip. In fact, we had a number of cases where line to ground fault ended up with thousands of megawatts coming offline. That happened in California a few times, Blue Cut Fire being the most notable. And then, of course, in Texas, the Odessa event and Odessa's brother again showed this frailty. And of course, industry's been working with the generators to open those controls up and make sure that they're just not adiosing every time there's a little minor voltage glitch on the system or a frequency concern.
Okay. Great report. Thank you. Let's move on down. Other questions?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Lauby, for the presentation and for the continued close coordination between FERC and NERC. It's really, really important and really appreciated. I think anytime there's an event like this, it's very important to study it carefully and to make sure that we're taking back all the lessons we can learn to make sure that events like this do not unfold in North America, and especially in the United States. It's all one grid, and this is just critically important work. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being a good colleague to help us work through this. I appreciate your sort of first framing point that, in this event, this was not any particular resource's fault. This was an operational and engineering challenge or series of challenges. And those practices and perhaps different or lack of standards led to performance issues in both their thermal and inverter-based fleet. And I also appreciate that we're still learning more. I think you mentioned ENSO report forthcoming, and I look forward to studying that and hearing NERC's expert advice on that report as well. And so just a few words before I get to a question. I mean, I just think it's so important that we look holistically at all the resources on the grid today and identify whether there are any gaps in our bulk power system reliability standards that would prevent a similar incident from occurring. And if we don't do this, it's just a recipe for failure, and that's, in my opinion, not an option. And so my question for you is this. Based on what we know so far, do you see any gaps in our current set of NERC reliability standards that would prevent something similar from happening here? And specifically, can you tell us about whether you see any gaps for inverter-based resources and whether you see any gaps for thermal resources, like anything left unaddressed here?
Certainly, thank you. And my philosophy really is around, you design a system and you build a system to make it work. And you make sure you got the right rules in place to make it work. And so the system that they're aspiring to build had some shortcomings around the need for voltage regulation, be it additional batteries or synchronous condensers or getting the combustion turbines up and running. So there's some shortfalls there, but it's it's kind of like if my pen runs out of ink, I can't blame the pen. It's me, I got to put new ink in it, and so it's a similar type thing. So as far as gaps in the standards, I think it's really important that we get 901 done. I know we NERC have been very focused on that. I know you have. You've helped us a great deal here. And we're really working with industry. We had a workshop during the time you had the adequacy conference, so I couldn't come to the conference. I had to go to the workshop. But
it's on YouTube.
Pardon? Yeah. It's really important to us, right? It was a busy week, and so I don't see any right now. Any gaps, glaring gaps. I think especially with the existing fleet, I think we need to continue to work with those organizations that can, if not all of the inverter-based resources have flexibility, they're kind of old. But the new technologies, the new inverters, make sure that we really open them up and have them supporting as much as possible and making sure that it's clear that we have the right models, because that's always a worry for an engineer. We're crazy about models because that's how we simulate and that's how we understand what's going to happen. So that's, I think, a little bit of a gap. Look, a relay engineer one time told me, his name was Rayburn, I think, and he said to me that nobody called him at 3 o'clock in the morning to tell him his relays worked. So we want to make sure that we never get that call at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so we work hard with you and industry every day to make sure that doesn't happen. So I quiz my engineers. I say, is it possible? They'll never say no, but they're pretty confident we're in good shape.
Good. Thank you. One other question, if you'll humor me. I also noticed that the Spanish grid operator recommended accelerating requirements for IBRs to provide voltage control. We just covered that in this slide here. We're already doing this. Message received, complete 901. We get heard. But my question, I think, first an observation, excuse me. I think it seems to me like the Commission, working with NERC, back in 2016 was really prescient to think about requiring these inverter-based resources to provide that service back in 2016, almost 10 years ago. And so with the question is this, with an eye to the horizon, would you recommend that we keep that good track record of solving problems before they become acute and start exploring the concept? I think you mentioned this term earlier, this IBR grid forming capability. Is that something that would be constructive?
Yeah, I never want to be looking in my rearview mirror and trying to drive the car, right? That's the old adage, and we want to make sure that we're staying in front of it. Nobody's ever going to call you at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, good job, either, unfortunately. But
I can do that.
All right. I got a story I got to tell about a 3 a.m. call, and I will tell
Okay.
it. Because you've said it twice now. And
Yeah.
so now I'm going to tell that story.
Mark would like a
But
3 a.m. call.
I think as we start retiring the older fleet, I think we're going to still need to have, a suitable fleet of combustion turbines, or what do you want to call them, gas-fired units to provide frequency support and inertia. And we'll continue to need to measure what it is. We do that now with our NERC standards. We measure frequency response, BAL standards. We send that report into OER. They review it with us every year, see how things are going and getting better or worse. So continue to monitor that. But to your point, because voltage, especially, is a localized phenomenon, and the need for frequency can be exacerbated when you don't have spinning units that may be some distance away. I think grid forming inverters help a great deal. I think they also help what we call stiffen the system, which kind of slows the impacts of disturbances on the system. Unfortunately, I think of it mathematically, and it's just very confusing about a Jacobian and all that, so we won't go there. But it helps stiffen the system. So yes, one of the recommendations that we had in one of our guidelines was that every battery storage should have grid-forming inverters going forward. The challenge is to be able to make sure that you can manage the controls so they don't fight each other. They actually unify and provide a consistent frequency. The beauty of the interconnections is it's all the same frequency. We can take power from one part of the interconnection and send it to the other. You don't have to worry about localized events because you've got enough oomph in the whole interconnection to help set off those challenges. There's a risk. What happens to your neighbor impacts you, and that's why NERC's here, and that's why we work with you on standards.
Terrific, thank you. Well, I look forward to working with NERC on that. Those are my questions. I think you mentioned this ENSO report is coming in September.
Yeah.
So I look forward to being in touch.
That's what Bruno told me, so I'll even mention by names. I'll put him on the spot.
Well, look forward to being in touch and continue the collaboration to learn all we can from this incident as we get that additional report.
Thank you.
The 3 a.m. call. Go back to you, Chairman.
All right, you said it twice. So a former mayor of Richmond told me this story. So it's hearsay, but it's probably true. But it was Tom Biley who went on to be chair of House Energy Committee. Some of you maybe have dealt with him. But when he was mayor of Richmond, he told this story about how his phone number was his residential phone number was in the phone book. That's back when there was such a thing as a phone book.
I remember those.
Back in the days when there was such a thing as a newspaper. But Tom Biley got a call at 3 a.m. from a person who identified himself as a constituent, a citizen of Richmond. He said, "There's a pothole in front of my house. I called Public Works yesterday. They still haven't filled it." So Tom Biley took his name and number, so I'll take care of it. Next morning, he calls Public Works, first thing, says, "Get out there and fix the damn pothole." Gives them the address. So they did. So that night, he waited till 3 a.m. He called this citizen and said, and when he answered the phone at 3 a.m., half asleep, Biley says, "How you like that pothole now?" And he still kept getting reelected.
I love that story.
So,
I might use that.
Yeah, no, true story. At least true as told to me. But anyway, all right, Commissioner C.
Mark, thank you so much. Really appreciate this and really appreciate the analysis. I learn so much whenever you present to us. We talk, and rightly so, about how important resource adequacy is when it comes to having resources to meet our energy needs, but grid stability is key, and we cannot have one without the other.
That's the second part of the equation, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the characteristics of resources coming on and off the grid inform that so much, so really appreciate your expertise in helping us with that. My questions have already been covered. I'm interested, I think the same thing we all are, and what do we need to learn, what do we need to be doing, but I will note I'm really grateful for the advanced planning that NERC and so many others are doing in this space. When we talk about needing all available tools, we talk about we mean being able to use them responsibly, and this sort of analysis, thinking ahead and after event assessments are really critical to that. So thank you. And just the last observation I'll make is, I will never have the physics and the engineering expertise that you and your teams do, but I'm just really grateful for the way that you're able to present it to us and to others. This is really valuable information, and especially at a time when we have such difficult and important public policy questions and debates going on about so many of the opportunities and challenges in front of us. I think just being able to understand well a lot of what's happening and what we need to know, that's so valuable. So thank you for that, and really appreciate the way you inform that public conversation.
I'm delighted. Thank you. I appreciate your kind words. It is a complicated system, but in the end, it's like you say, it's two bits of an equation.
Yeah.
Do I have enough energy, and what's the operational reliability, right? And
Absolutely.
so we got to manage both of those pieces of the equation.
Right. Well, thank you again. That's it for me.
Commissioner Chang, you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lauby, for your presentation and the slides ahead of time. I do have several questions, but I want to first say, as Commissioner C said, your work and all of the work that NERC does is super important, and this just shows how important that is. We forget sometimes that the world has its eyes on the U.S. for technological innovation and advancement, and this is true for all of your hard work on setting grid standards. So let's continue to lead in this area. I do have some questions, and I'll just say, leading into it, your report and the reports presented by Red Electrica and the grid operator in Spain, and the report presented by the government of Spain both agreed that the lack of voltage control has caused the blackout in the Iberian Peninsula. The report also states that some of the synchronous generators that Red Electrica called on to respond to the voltage conditions were not able to respond, at least not respond correctly. So I'm trying to understand, I've been listening closely to what you're saying, are you thinking of this as an operational procedures and a situation awareness issue, such as modeling and control room capabilities, as you described, or sort of resource into that resources failing to respond? And since I'm on the phone, I'm going to just send you the questions all together and then listen to your response, if you don't mind. So that's my first question. My second question is, I'm interested very much in the fact that you are reflecting that we have here in the U.S., we have or are working hard on reliability standards that should protect against this type of this lack of response from voltage control perspective. And we are already doing, on your slide 11, in fact, it shows we are already doing what have been recommended after the fact, after the Spanish events. So while we always want to learn lessons from others, are you feeling like we are better prepared for managing voltage excursions like what has happened in Spain? Okay, so that's my second question. And then the other thing is, you mentioned several times that only conventional synchronous resources are required to provide reactive power and provide dynamic voltage control, whereas in the U.S. we require all resources to regulate voltage, including renewable energy resources and batteries and other inverter-based resources, which can respond quite quickly. From what you said, I expect that the availability of these availability of more types of resources that can help regulate voltage would really help us meet these kind of challenges. And is that the case? And then one last thing before I let you respond to all of that is that I noticed that in your presentation, or maybe reading other reports, that several generators tripped at the same time, either through their reliance on a single transformer or some other impact. So I'm just wondering, have we also corrected or have we also set standards to make sure, or is this just not a practice in the U.S. to have several separate generators behind the same transformer such that we are actually less likely to see a similar situation here in the U.S. So those are all my questions. Thank you, and thank you for all the work you do.
Well, thank you for that. And I'll try to go through those questions. If I miss something, please let me know. Around the generation responding, there were two bits there. One was the desire to have more generators come online, the operators, after they saw where they were at. They ordered them to come online, but there wasn't enough time before the event occurred. But as far as responding correctly, I think that's still something we need to study. I hate to speculate. My sense is when I read the report, there was a lot of discussion around tap changers. And as I mentioned before, tap changers take time to regulate the voltage. And if the voltage is changing quickly, they may not be able to keep up. And that, of course, may have exacerbated the problem. To get to your last question around that kind of issue, we don't have as many tap changers around our generators like they may have in Spain. But again, I want to say that may be a bit speculative, and I want to make sure we do our homework on that. And I think Enzo will probably answer that question better. But I do feel we are better prepared to manage these voltage excursions because of our rules around IVRs and their ability to support voltage. They have AVRs on them. The amount of battery storage that is being coupled, especially in California, a large growth in Texas, again, to be able to manage and regulate the system. Can more batteries help to meet the challenge? I think that's what you're seeing with the continued growth in Texas and California. California also has synchronous condensers. I think they're talking about building synchronous condensers also in Texas, but don't quote me on it. Well, somebody will tell me if I got it wrong. But that, again, to provide more dynamic support. So batteries help a great deal. The only key thing is managing the charge, right? You got to make sure you got enough charge to help you. And there's a whole host of science around on managing the state of charge. Reliance on a single, better. Yeah, I think that's. Did I get them all? Did I miss something, Commissioner Chan?
One thing that I wanted to hear your feedback on is whether you think this is a operational procedure and situation awareness.
Okay.
Because when I speak with some of the ISOs, I'm understanding that many of the ISOs, or several of the ISOs, are now procuring technology that can help them be much more aware of what's coming up, sort of either modeling very short-term situations right ahead of occurring. I'm just wondering if you think those kind of activities would have prevented this kind of events, like being just more situational aware, modeling and advanced control room technologies and capabilities, whether those would also be helpful, and what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of things that come to my mind. First of all, the oscillations themselves, it really bugs me a bit, because I know we have small signal oscillations on our grids, but we've been able to tune the grid so we don't have impacts from them. We use power system stabilizers generally to do that, and we haven't seen small signal stability challenges in quite a long time. I worked years ago on that project with EPRI. And so we have the tools, we know how to manage it. So I do worry just from a design perspective, okay? So from an operator perspective, I think what was lacking here certainly was a few things. One is understanding the implications of when they were tuning those oscillations out, what that was doing to the grid as far as voltage is concerned. And could they had better situational awareness tools on that and some alarming on that? Possibly, I don't know. I don't know what they have there myself. But I think some of the advanced tools to understand state of charge, to understand the state of the voltage regulation on your system, I think would have been extremely helpful to them. It would have been better if they had better plans. And that's where I kind of focus my attention here. that they would, at 4 o'clock in the morning, start spinning up more units. So they had the voltage support that they would need in the event that these oscillations occurred, and they were going to mitigate them by changing the impedance of the system, which again is it's a kind of a blunt force way of doing it, quite frankly. Yeah. But yeah, I think more tools is always better.
Great, thank you. That's all from me, Chairman.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, and your team. NERC does a great job, and this just shows how important NERC is. And it also just drives home to me. I've been doing utility regulation for 21 years. This is an extremely amazing system.
It is.
It is an amazing system from an engineering standpoint.
There's some real smart people, not me, that designed and built it, and they know how to run it. It's incredible.
Well, it's really, from an engineering standpoint, I think the grid is just an amazing,
They call it
amazing engineering accomplishment.
The largest achievement of the 21st century. Now we're building the largest computer, right? With chips and solar panels and everything else.
Yeah, I would say, it shows why you want the grid run by engineers, not lawyers, except as lawyers, we know everybody else's business. So, maybe not. But anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.